Welcome everybody to Radicalized Truth Survives. I'm Heidi Kuda. Today, Hi-Fi and I for episode 160 are bringing back Ukrainian historian Tetiana Boriak. She's going to talk about her reflections on the last 4 years of the full-scale invasion of Russia's war of aggression in Ukraine. She also has taught us much about a century of Russian imperialism. But the bottom line, we're going to talk about why Russia must be stopped. Have a listen. Tetiana Boriak, we are so grateful that you're back with us today, particularly during this particular week. It's really important for us to speak with Ukrainians, and we are also profoundly grateful for our historians. So we're going to be doing multiple interviews with people who not only, understand the contemporary affairs, but have a real depth of history, as obviously you do. And I just really wanted to talk to you today just to sort of get a temperature check on your reflections in this moment, in this week, where a 3-day war has gone on 4 years, and it actually started in 2014. And as you've taught us, it actually started, back in the 20th century, 100 years ago, plus. So what are your thoughts as a Ukrainian mother and a historian? As we reflect on the events of the last few years?
Good morning, good evening, whatever time zone you are in. Thank you for inviting me, and yes, it's really important, and I'm grateful to the audience who would like to not to turn away from some far war that is going on somewhere in Europe between two brotherhood nations. It might look this way, but unfortunately, it is not about Ukraine. And as you've mentioned it, and as we all know, officially it's a kind of the beginning of the 5th year, but actually we know that the war began in 2014. And so now it's 13th year of this war that, like Ukrainians say, that lasts for centuries. And the reason for this war is just simple and one: the Russian imperialism that now is taking form of the official ideologema Ruski Mir, the Russian world. Ukraine has not fallen yet. I do hope that we will not only survive, but we can win. Unfortunately, what I see as a Ukrainian, we lost, and by we I mean Ukraine and the free world, the democratic world, the West, whatever you might call it, all those countries who are trying to keep the international law alive, but it's already dead. And if the assistance would come, serious assistance would come during the first several years when the Russian army was not able to dig really deep into the ground on the occupied territories, when the human losses would have been less, with more weaponry, we could probably do more, and we could probably now celebrate victory. Unfortunately, the world, and yes, we know that there were countries that were amazing in support, but it's difficult to distinguish. So I'm generalizing a little bit. So I beg pardon from those who think that they really helped a lot. But I mean that the assistance was not enough. And the reason was the same as in 1933. On the first, on the second day of the war, I was thinking, oh my God, is it going to be like in 1933 when Ukrainians were starved to death intentionally by Kremlin because he wanted to break the resistance of Ukrainians so that they would not leave the Soviet Union. And the world knew about the famine. They had the reports from their diplomats, but they have chosen their own national interest, and they have chosen business as usual, as we call it now. And the price for this business as usual was the rate of that Ukrainians starved to death on their own land. They did not went as occupiers with some wars. They were in their houses, in their huts, in the villages. It was approximately 4 million during approximately 6 months. And what I saw on February 24th, 2022, the same horrible feeling. Is it gonna be like in 1933? Is the world is going to choose business as usual and national interest as usual, as it did 90 years ago? Again, there were countries and still are countries who are supporting us. But the problem is that, and it's logical, I understand it, because for a normal human being, it is normal to want peace, to live in a peaceful country, to raise kids, to get married, to go to dating, to look for a job, to get education, to go to travel, to meet with family. These are some normal issues we even do not think about. We just know that they must, it must have, we must have it in our life. So Europe was not ready for this war. And the war did not begin even in 2014. It began against Ukraine in 2014. But basically, the Kremlin he did not leave the stage of the war. It is on this stage starting from 1917. It's already 100 years. And during this 100 years, the Kremlin as this collective, Lenin, Stalin, Brezhnev, Khrushchev, Brezhnev and company, then this collective Gorbachev, Putin, the specific mentality has been formed. And this is the problem because it is a huge civilizational mental gap between the Russian state and the free world. Because as I've explained, normal people in normal countries just want to have these points I've mentioned, while the Russian state, together with the Russian society, I insist, it is not Putin's war, together with the Russian society that has been militarized starting from 1918, that has been put into the frames of the absolutely horrible social engineering project, Soviet social engineering project, when the instrument of ruling 1/6 part of the whole world was fear, violence, and terror. And there are some historical reasons, explanations that I will not go into this, that help to understand why Ukrainians have managed to live this trap and why the Russian society is still in this horrible mental frame. And so I'm returning to my thought about Europe. So Europe was thinking that in 1991, as this famous article, The End of History, was written, so like, yes, we're there. The liberalism has won. everybody will live in peace. Cool. Let's demolish our military infrastructure, military plants. Let's turn them into some chips manufacturer. And now we see that this was a horrible mistake. The horrible mistake was that the European community has forgiven, together with the United States, Canada, and other big countries in terms of economy, they forgiven the Russian state, the Chechen war. They forgiven occupation of Pridnestrovia in Moldova. They said, okay, in 2008. In 2014, when Ukrainians were trying to do something with Crimea to defend it, to eliminate the Russian occupants who appeared with no signs, like, as they said, polite soldiers that acting as cowards, the American president said, no, just give them the Crimean Peninsula. And when you're trying to bargain to say okay to the state that is making wars and is occupying the territories of the other countries, the war will not end. It might stop for some time. Then this country will build more plants, like Europe, and in several years it will come again. And this is what happened with 2022, when since 2014 Ukrainians and the Baltic states were screaming, were trying to attract the attention of the world community that we have the problem of the Russian imperialism. We thought that it's already dead. We were trying to say to ourselves that no, they now live so well. They have this extra money from gas, from oil. They live like the best life the Russians have ever lived. Why the hell would you think in terms of occupying some other territories? In 2014, Ukrainians realized that yes, we were mistaken. We began to defend our territory. We liberated part of now mostly occupied regions of Donetsk and Lugansk Oblast. We started to rebuild our military infrastructure. We launched the missiles program, but we did not have enough time and we did not have enough resources, because since 2014 we had to invest huge amount of money into army, and it's very expensive. To lead the war, you have to be really rich country. And yes, Ukrainian leadership did made the mistakes in the beginning of the war, in the end of the peace period, obviously. But this is another story, because the mistakes of the Ukrainian leadership do not excuse the aggressor, the country that crossed the border of the other country. And for me, as a historian, not as a mother, as a citizen of Ukraine, as a historian, the worst part for me is what I see is, and we were discussing in this cognitive warfare, and essential part of it, and now I see it pretty clearly. It's implementation into the consciousness of the Russians, Ukrainians, the societies of many other countries, of so-called historical consciousness that is basically pushing out the international law. and this is the most horrible thing one could think on, how one can weaponize history. Because if you open just some reference book or a textbook of your kid, you will see how many how many times, nobody even knows how many times, and how did the borders of various states, especially in Europe, shifted, moved, how some areas became parts of some other states, then through the wars or some kinds of agreements, these borders moved, etc., etc. And now the Russian state, with its incredible amount of money they still have, and besides investing them into military sphere, the second sphere, well, the third, because the fourth is their own business, then military field sphere, and the third, number three, is investing this just millions of euros, nobody knows how much, into information warfare. And so now we see, when, for instance, American journalist Tucker Carlson, yes, he interviewed Putin, and for more than 1 hour he was listening so-called historical lecture by the head of the Russian state that is leading genocidal war against another state, and the American journalist was listening to his historical lecture in this way, basically saying that, yeah, okay, historical consciousness and arguments and reasoning can now be number one in international relations. And this is just a catastrophe for the whole system of international relations, because, as I said, every country has some minorities living in some other countries, has some phantom pains about some lost territories due to previous wars that have taken place like 500 years ago. So the Russian state, the Russian propaganda is now normalizing this so-called historical consciousness and saying that, yeah, let's now involve it into the international relations. Let's make it the foundation of the international relations. And this is... So when I read some articles or hear like some discussions on is Ukraine winning? Is Russia winning? Who is like now ahead? I don't know whether I should cry or should I laugh, because guys, wait, don't you see that we're moving directly and pretty fast to intensification of the military actions? Don't you see this? If the democratic world that is in minority, but still it possesses huge economic potential, if you normalize this rhetoric about historical consciousness, if you are not ready to defend your countries against the drones that now we see is absolutely new military reality. And there was an interesting fact, it was in either the last year or in 2024, I don't remember, but it doesn't matter, like the last year or the year before, there were some military like training, yes, this common, I don't know this exact word, like common training, military NATO training in Estonia, probably in one of the countries that are members of NATO. And so Ukrainian militaries obviously were invited because they possess now amazing experience that is obtained in the direct battle against the Russians. And so Ukrainian militaries were invited to participate in this military training. So what they did, they used drones. And the other side, the NATO militaries, they were not ready. Absolutely. On the second or the third or the fourth year of the war, they have not changed their approaches. So Ukrainian soldiers came, organized this system of communication, put drones, and like in 1 hour, the first defense line of the NATO was combated by the drones. Yeah. NATO generals were very stressed and shocked, and like privately, there's an article about this you can find if you want. And one general, NATO general, said, "Yeah, that's a catastrophe. We are not ready for the war of the new type." Several days ago, former Ukrainian head of the general staff of the general headquarters, Valery Zaluzhny, published an article. Not he delivered a speech, and then an article was published following his speech in, I think it was in Chatham House in Britain, where he's an ambassador now. And just read it. If you want to survive, you would like to read this article. He is an amazing analytic. He is just incredible. And what he does, he has drawn the perspectives for Europe, the countries that are close to the Russian Federation. And so he explains that the only way for Europe to survive is to be united, is to have common military enterprises that will produce, that will closely watch and analyze the situation on the battlefield that you can't imagine, but it's like changing every day with something new is being invented by an enemy, then Ukrainians are reacting, are resisting, are inventing some kind of their system, then the Russians are reacting, are trying to combat. So you just can't imagine how intense the war is, even if you don't see it. So the drones, they have really changed the war, because people were trying to find some familiar points in the past, and for Europe it is obviously the Second World War. Yes, so we're trying to make parallels, but please read his article, because he shows, and basically Ukraine is witnessing this, that there is no more safe space in the country. Like in 2014, we had a front line, but like 50 kilometers from the front line, the life was pretty safe. Exactly because the drones did not exist then, or they did not exist on such a mass scale. They were not able to fly as far as they fly now.
Yeah. And
the missiles are necessary, the drones, the exchange of experience, and now the Ukrainian army is the only army that knows how to lead this war of the 21st century. NATO is not ready yet, unfortunately.
Clearly.
And this combination of non-comprehension of the Russian imperialism, of the cognitive warfare they are leading, on their wish to eliminate completely international law, because this is the last thing that somehow a little bit but still restrains them. Without the international law, the whole world would be theirs. They are obsessed with, not only with Ukraine, Ukraine obsession, that's a separate story. They are obsessed with controlling the world, because the system that has been built in Russia, it cannot exist, it cannot coexist with the democratic countries, because the ugliness of the Soviet statehood would be seen immediately. So the only way for Russia to survive is to spread their influence, to conquer, to lead the war, to have this this constant readiness of the Russian society to dominate in this or that way, in military or in cultural way. And Surkov wrote about this perfectly. Yes. We want to undermine the world order. He wrote an article 1 week before the February 24, 2022. We want and we will undermine the world order, guys. He warned us, but he wasn't heard by those who had to hear this and be ready for the war. And as I'm finishing, unfortunately, I'm now very pessimistic, because the militarization of the Russian society is on. Now, in the conditions of the 21st century, it seems that it is impossible to block completely, to isolate completely such big state, big in terms of territory, obviously, not anything else. You cannot isolate this country. There are many countries who still wish to do business, and they don't care about the international sanctions. The Russian imperialism that is everywhere, Russian song, Russian film, Russian exhibition, participation of the Russian sportsmen in Olympic Games, and now they are allowed in Paralympic Games to come with their own flag. So cool. International Olympic Committee says, we do not know how many thousands of victims from the Ukrainian side. We don't care. Go, guys, with your own flags, Russia and Belarus. And Belarus gave the territory for attacking my country and approaching the capital of Ukraine, Kiev. No, guys, that doesn't matter. 4 years have passed. Go with your flags. And the irony, the horror of the situation is that during the Paralympic Games, as we understand, there are people with some disabilities. And guess where the Russians with disabilities come from? They come from the war. And now these people, with their own flag, they put on occupied Ukrainian territories, they will compete probably with the Ukrainians who became disabled while defending their own country. So the cynicism and unfairness of the contemporary world is incredible, and it's very painful for Ukrainians to see these things. And it seems like we return to some kind of the Middle Ages with the law of those who has strengths. If you are big and powerful, you will survive. If no, look for some unions. You don't know how these unions might end, because the international law is almost dead. But for you, this is the only option. Otherwise, someone who is bigger and more powerful will eat you. And while eating, it will say that, we're actually one nation. You don't see it? No? Strange. We have common history. You disagree? We have common language. Your language does not exist. and your literature does not exist. So that's why we're eating you, and we will become this one nice unified space. So these are my reflections.
Thank you so much, Tetiana. That was incredibly powerful. Neither Hi-Fi nor I wanted to interrupt you. I will say that I interviewed a Croatian politician yesterday who said the only ally of small countries is international law. And she said if that international law is almost dead, then there are going to be 160 small countries and medium-sized countries that are going to unite together to bring back international law. And I will connect the two of you because I think that the more that we look and see the reality of the situation and which you just delineated perfectly, the more that the smaller and mid-sized countries have got to unite together to continue, into the future. Because what you just said is exactly what Russia would like to see. I can't top that. High five, final word, final thought.
I just have one question for you. And on this program, I have been saying for months, if not years, that Russia has started World War III. If you look at their actions in Moldova, Lithuania, Czechia, Slovakia, Georgia, France, Germany, Spain, Italy, the UK, the United States, Africa. If you look everywhere, and the reason I say this is because they're using cognitive warfare, they're using information warfare, and what everybody forgets about those things is their warfare. And President Zelensky has just come out in the last couple of days and said, yes, Putin has started World War III. Ukraine is the only outpost standing in the breach. And if Ukraine falls, this war will engulf the globe. Do you agree with this position? Do you disagree with this position? What are your thoughts?
Yes, as I've said, the comparison with the Second World War do not work, because if we look at the Second World War, there was Wehrmacht who went directly. Information warfare was not as powerful. It was mainly Britain that was doing it. But now we live in the world. Well, it was Gerasimov, the head of the Russian headquarters, who invented the term hybrid war. So now it's a combination of all these types of war: consciential war, the war for your conscience, cognitive warfare, mental warfare, international or informational warfare, the ordinary kind of ordinary war with the weaponry. And the Russian society and the Russian leadership, they are ready. They don't care about the losses. They are obsessed with their imperialism. Yes, we are already at war. I think in 2014 we see this new. We can say, yes, it's difficult to say the exact date, but I think that those combination of factors, international warfare, annexation, this polite soldiers, basically the Russian soldiers who were to confess that they were there, all this informational situation, this pressure over the American president Barack Obama, who basically allowed the Crimea to become part of Russia. I cannot predict, but I have a feeling that if Ukraine will fall or will be forced to capitulate, to write some kind of agreement, first it would be temporary agreement, and then a lot of army would the Russian army would just stay with no work. Do you think they will return home? I don't think so. They will go further. And they have Finland, they have Baltic states, Lithuania, where I now live with my two kids as a refugee. They have Kazakhstan, and they see that nobody can stop them. That is the problem of this whole situation in the international community that has so many countries. That like one American US state has more this how this term ВВП, this like the amount of economy is bigger.
GDP. Yes.
GDP, yes, like
Yeah.
one US state has GDP bigger than the whole Russia.
Yeah.
But still, the international community is charmed with Russian literature, Russian language, Russian presentations, Russian ballet, sport, music, etc., etc. And if you do not stop an aggressor, why should he stop by himself? Why? He is okay. His economy somehow works. They have militarized the economy. They have fun bombing Ukrainian houses that are left with no water, electricity, heating. Now it's warmer, but it was like minus 20 Celsius degree. And many of my relatives sat with, and friends like sat with nothing in their cold apartments having minus 20. They are okay, and they see that the world, the steps and actions that the world is taking is not enough. It's just some small bites for them. Why should they stop? They will not stop. They did not stop in 2014. Why would they stop now? So I guess yes, we're already at war. In all these types of the war, that's we have to understand that it's not like they even did not declare openly the war to Ukraine. There was some speech of Putin. I listened to that speech. But
special military operation, 3-day special military operation.
Yes.
Thank you. Tetiana, thank you so much. Your passion and the horror is felt within our community. And all I know is I translated an article that you'd written on the topic of the cognitive warfare, and I called it an undeclared war for all mankind. This is an undeclared war for all mankind, and I hope that people listen to your words and are better informed of their own proximity to danger. The easiest thing the world could do right now is support Ukraine entirely to beat the Russian aggressor. If Putin is defeated, then everything crumbles in the decrepit empire of Russia. And, I, for one, will hold out hope that people like you will continue to get the message across to people who could actually do something about it. So I thank you so much for your time and your experience.
Thank you for your support. Only together we can survive and have future. Only together. Otherwise, they will divide Europe, and then they will eat country by country in this or that way. Now you don't have to occupy. Look at Belarus. Officially, it's not occupied, but there is no Belarus anymore. It's just Russian colony. They can do this also. So thank you.
That's right. Thank you so much.